started?
No, I started. It's already running.
Oh, okay.
So,
I figured I could record myself.
no, I'll be back at the end.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You see Jack. He's the one who's supposed to be.
Right, yeah.
So I don't know. Actually, let's not worry about it. I'll just.
Yeah, I'm not going to worry about it. It's not that big a deal.
Testing. Okay. Good deal. How are you doing? I haven't seen you.
Did you believe that they didn't hire me for that fancy job? I could not believe it. Well,
You don't want to say anything on tape, right?
yeah. It was mutual. That's all. There we go. But that's kind
Did you ever cruise? Are you cruising?
No. I can't tell you what I cruise for you.
Are you cruising?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have a lot of interesting secrets to tell you.
I feel that we'll see each other at some point. All right. Seems like a good time to start. You're officially in welcome to the building committee. This is going to be a discussion about building processes in general and using this building as an example. So I'd like a show of hands. How many of you are either about to embark on a building project or hope to embark on a building project or something like that? Oh, great. This talk will be directly relevant to all of you. I encourage questions. We've got a lot of content, but the more relevant it can be to the audience, that's the most important thing. So let's start by saying, my name is Jonathan Franklin. I'm the Associate Law Librarian here at the University of Washington Gallagher Law Library. And I was involved in the process of this building, so I know bits and pieces. The other person who coordinated this presentation with me was unable to be here is Dan Jardine. He was the project manager of the local architect, and as we'll discuss, that has some interesting aspects in and of itself. So the two of us basically put together our brains near the end of the process and said, here's what we would like to tell people who are just entering the process. Okay? No, this is going to be fun. You're going to enjoy it. And you know what's amazing? I know for many of you, the products that you have from your daily work might not be particularly tangible. I mean, it might be a memo or an exam or a grade list or something like that, or a student coming up at graduation telling you how much they loved your course. But something about a building, when you look at a pillar and say, I know why that pillar is there, or that outlet is only in that classroom because I put it there, is kind of cool. So I think it can be an incredibly rewarding process. Dan and I worked together for over 4 years on the facility that we're now sitting in, which is a 200,000 gross square foot facility. You'll see that we say it's a $53 million home, and we'll get into some of the details of numbers and budgets in a little bit. It was designed, the exterior, largely by Cohn Pedersen Fox, which is a big New York architectural firm. And a lot of the interior and a lot of the choices were made in collaboration between Cohn Pedersen Fox and our local architect, Malum. Okay? And we're here basically to try to pass on some wisdom, advice, etc., so that you can go into the project doing an even better job than we did. So, what we're going to talk about, the first thing is the building committee. The organization, the function. Why do you want certain personalities on a building committee? Why do you not want certain personalities on a building committee? And looking at sort of it as an organism. Then we're going to talk about what's special about law schools. Why not just pull in the B-school team and have them do your building? You wouldn't want to do that. Then how the design process actually works. This is as nuts and bolts as we're going to get. And then some concluding comments. And we'll have time for questions at the end. Although you're welcome to just raise your hand anytime and say, I don't get it. Why would you ever want to do that? Anything. Okay, let's start. When we entered the process, the law school, we sort of thought, oh yeah, well we're going to talk to the architects and tell them what we want. It's all going to be hunky-dory. And that is really not the fact because we're not the client. The law school in this enterprise was never the client. The only relationship with the architect was the University of Washington, going all the way up to the regents. So you as a law school might think, well, we have some important ideas. That's great, but that's only really part of the picture from the university perspective. So universities have procedures, they have rules that you may not even know about that might fundamentally affect your building. For example, how many bathrooms are there here? Well, we had some ideas about that, but the university had some really strong ideas about that. So, know who your building university project manager is. In this case, he was a conduit for a lot of information, and going both ways. If you don't know who that is, you're not really going to be as in the loop as if you know, take him out to coffee, do all that good stuff. Here we are. So, some of the things. We have the architect, goes through the university to the law school building committee. Physical plant, where are you getting your cold water from? Good question. Where are you getting your power from? How are the steam tunnels coming into the building? Health and safety, what materials do they like you to use? What materials do they not like you to use? The locksmith, well, which doors are going to open on which keys? The sign shop, a lot of things around here are determined by university standards for disabled, all sorts of other things well beyond the ADA that govern how the university would like things to appear. Computing and communication fundamentally affects our network architecture. Classroom support services affects that we have overhead projectors in almost all of our classrooms, even though they're not as frequently used as they are in some other professions, in some other schools. Fire safety, you look at fire suppression systems. We had a rare book room. We talked about alternative fire suppression systems. Fire safety had some comments about our plans. And recycling. So as you see all the bins around, basically there was a large budget item for recycling bins that we had no control over. They said, you are getting these bins, here's where they are going. Okay. Now, within the law school, you do have control. So let's look at the sphere that we have some control over. And the first thing is the building committee chair. I would encourage you, if you're on a building committee and the dean is the chair, it's really hard to do, but to tactfully suggest that the dean might be really, really busy doing other things during this process. Whether it's raising money, whether it's dealing with other issues that may arise, whether it's just the day-to-day running of the law school that individual has done in the past. Because having the building committee and having people sit down and look at plans, often they have to get done at a certain time, and if you have extraordinarily busy individuals, they may not have the time to do it. And to have that person as a leader creates additional trouble. However, that person also needs the authority to make decisions. If the chair doesn't have the authority and has to go to the dean and say, is it okay if we do this? Is it okay if we do that? That's not good either. So you need those two combinations, and you need the confidence of all parties. So I'd say in this building we had Bill Anderson as our chair. He's a widely respected scholar, senior faculty member, who was really a very good listener. If you want somebody on your building committee, you need somebody who's going to take all the input, filter it, try to look at it from all phases, listen to the committee members, and try to move forward. There are many situations in which building committees just hit a logjam. Half of them want X, half of them want Y, the chair takes no authority or has no authority, and the project becomes massively more expensive as they stall making these vital decisions. The other piece of the puzzle that I think worked very well for this building, and would likely work well for all of yours, is to have a strong library advocate. The library takes up approximately 50% of this building, of the net square footage of this building. And a lot of it is filled with shelving. And some of it is filled with other things that are really pretty library specific. And I think I can be honest on tape and say that not that many other people in the law school care about library shelving other than library folk. So I would strongly suggest that you have a library person looking at that piece. And then also representation from faculty, administration, support groups, which is a very, very broad category, and finally student groups. So here's my ideal model. I tried to pick one. It doesn't have to be 6 members. It could be 9. You don't want to get to an unwieldy 13 or so. But if you have a judicious committee chair, then you have some students. Now, the problem is that the lifetime of the project may involve several student rounds. In our case, that was certainly it, and each year they had different ideas. But having their input adds legitimacy, and often they had good ideas that we really hadn't thought about. You need someone from Dean, Development Academic Services. You also need someone from the library. Faculty, you really want a diversity of faculty. If you have all high-tech faculty, you say, I love technology, every room has to be high-tech, you're going to end up with a very different building from if you have one with a diverse range where someone is saying, you know, I hate whiteboards, I really want a chalkboard, or whatever the issues that arise. And then also clinicians. Clinicians care about clinical space, but they also have an awareness of how the classroom is used, that they might say, well, this is just a dysfunctional arrangement. How can you have every classroom just be rows or something like that? And trial advocacy has incredibly strong and incredibly useful opinions that we'll get to in a little bit. So even though often their trial advocacy professors are adjuncts, taking the effort to involve them in the process at the start will, I think, reap benefits that I'm not sure that we reap to our fullest. Okay. What is the architect going to get from this building committee? Why even have a building committee? Well, basically, you are the brain trust. You're the only person who knows what the institution wants. So the architect's going to pick your brain and try to figure out what you need and then convert that from an abstract notion into a concrete building. So communicate your interests, but also understand the architect's interests. You know, in terms of issues, if you don't understand why he or she has made a certain choice, then you want to ask them why they've done that. Okay, schedule. Let's say that the building committee starts over here. Okay. We're going to be talking about the process. We're going to start with this process. And that's going to be the focus of most of our discussion because that's when the building committee is the most active. Then you have design documentation. That's where you're starting to get to what color fabric do you have on the chairs, what kind of carpet, do you want birch or maple on the walls, stuff like that. Ideally, at the end of this, you have some documents, and then it's put out to bid, and they basically build it with as few changes as possible. And so the building committee sort of is massively involved, quite involved, ideally not that involved. So it may be a little while before you see the fruits of your labor, but at the same time, you have to start early. Now, the budget. None of this happens without a budget. And we're going to talk about the critical balance there, and then that there are two kinds of budgets. The first thing is the budget game. Okay? Now, a lot of you are used to the scales of justice with only two, right? Now, this is the super-duper expanded building scale of justice. Okay? So what you have to do is you have to think about your building. Let's say, in this case, we have a $53 million building, right? So I'm going to put $53 million in this basket. Okay. Now, if I come over here, I could have a 300,000-foot trailer park. Huge size, pretty low quality, not to malign trailer parks, but they're perhaps lower construction quality than a 100,000-foot Taj Mahal with all marble imported from India. So you have to think about balancing size and quality if you want to keep the same dollar figure. What you're often going to find is you want a big building with high quality, and then you have the problem of raising more money. And if the dean is out raising more money because the building committees decide on size and quality, then you don't want them on the building committee. So first of all, think about that balance. And we're going to be talking about the budget as a harsh master. And that is because at every stage in the building process, there's a check. And if your building is not within budget, then you're either going to have to remove something or raise more money. The university won't let you / the architect / the project move forward without it. Okay. Now, in this project and in many projects, based on Dan, 60% of the building is construction. So when I say it's a $53 million building, yeah, that's right. But there's $27 million of project costs, such as this beautiful table, and the sales tax, and the equipment, and the moving expenses. Moving a library, not that cheap. A lot of the AV equipment. Some of the cable plant is counted as in the building. Some of the cabling and the head-end units for the AV are counted as equipment. It becomes a really interesting game if you want to try to slide money around. But if people are talking about a construction budget, that's very different from a project budget. Now, law school issues. This is where, if you have questions, if you have another law school issue, please feel free to raise it. We're going to talk first.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So of your 53 million, 60% was just building it?
Actually, of the 80 million, 60% was the building, was that 53. And then the additional 27 that we tacked on to bring it up to 80. But one cool thing I'll mention is that, okay, let's say that you're building the building and you've spent your $53 million, but you decide you really want nice furniture. You can go on a fundraising binge at the very end and try to get nicer furniture, because what you're doing really is you're not affecting the construction budget at all. You're just supplementing the project budget, which is what we did, basically. Begged, borrowed, stole, etc. So now, we're going to look at some special features of law schools. First of all, law libraries are a major portion of the program. We're going to talk more about the program, but really, if you think about it, it's the square footage of the building. What percentage of the square footage of the building is the library? Often libraries will have differential operating hours. Faculty want to feel quite secure in their offices, let's say when they're working on a weekend. But the library might also want to be open on a weekend. How do you balance the security versus access issues between the library and, let's say, the faculty and student spaces? A single entrance. Libraries tend to like to have a single entrance for security reasons. In Condon Hall, we had 22 entrances and exits to the library and no security system. One of the rationales for the building of this building was so that the library could have one entrance, one exit, one security system, and actually retain books rather than having them walk out all 22. So it can be a great PR move as well. Public access. Maybe you don't want the public wandering through your law school, but you want them to come use your law library. If so, you have to think, well, are you going to create a separate entrance from the exterior? Are you going to create a set of barricades and moving, shifting blocks? So finally, ADA improvements. There are a lot of ADA laws specific to libraries, and if you have somebody library-related on the building committee who has the relevant materials, they can focus on how wide the stacks have to be, is this going to work, what is the wheelchair turnaround, and the architects will definitely help you with that. But if you're starting to look into those issues, ADA library issues are pretty substantial. U-shaped classrooms. So now we've moved up in this building from L1 and L2 below us to this low floor. And a lot of faculty here are not lecturers, right? Whether it's Socratic method, panel method, small group, part of the importance is being able to either cluster a small group or at least have this student, when commenting, being visible to the vast majority of the rest of the class. Some faculty members may want to be in the pit and be the center. Some may pull back here. But the design issues around a U-shaped classroom are substantial. And I will flag one of the other ones is that when you add a U-shaped classroom to technology and you add a screen right here, then all of a sudden you have to start thinking, well, can this person see the screen? Oops, that seat goes away. Can this person see the screen? Oops, oops, oops. So if you suddenly are losing 14 seats in a classroom, all of a sudden your 90 has basically become a 76. And in some schools, that's a really huge difference. So U-shaped classrooms, particularly with technology, are a key issue. Here is a nightmare. This is probably the worst nightmare that we faced. The idea that you want to design a classroom, for example, our room 138, to hold 175 students while still working as a trial advocacy facility. So this is an earlier version where they inverted the judge and the jury. But the idea is the same. All of a sudden, you've noticed probably from this morning's presentation, there's a drop-down screen here. The projector is firing basically from the top of the screen down to here. Well, okay, that's really great, but the jury can't see that screen, the judge can't see that screen, the witness can't see that screen. So the AV system that we installed for it to be its primary use, a classroom, is completely dysfunctional for it as a trial advocacy room. In addition, a lot of trial advocacy professors want the jury to be able to see the sight line, to be able to see the witness's face when you got the killer question. And they want the judge to be able to see the witness's face as well. Well, there are a lot of logistical angle problems with creating that space while still having a classroom and not having it. So one thought is to create dedicated trial ad space. The other thought is to use movable seating and maybe not adapt the courtroom for this use. But there's a huge tension there. And that is that often law schools, when they have visiting judges, either appellate or trial court judges, want to show it off. Want it in the nicest room, want the most people to be able to attend. So you've got a fundamental tension there between a room that will work for a mock trial or real trial and a large classroom. Lockers. Lockers are a hot issue. We're in Seattle. It's wet weather. People bring often coats. A lot of people bike and have huge laptops as well. So we had lockers that were large enough. But once you have enough large lockers, it's really an awesome array. If we put them all and line them up all along the gallery, it would look horrible. So one of the issues we faced was, well, do we distribute them around the building and make some less convenient than others? Or do we put them all in one place and create sort of this communal bottleneck? We distributed them, but that took quite a bit of discussion. And And also our locker design, if you go on one of the building tours, ask someone to open a locker. It's got some amazing features inside, like a hinge with a magnet so that it can be enlarged, or you can store your lunch under where you put your laptop. And it's got hooks, and it was really very well thought out. Public clinics. Public clinics are key to the design process, and I don't think anybody realized how important they were early on. Because a public clinic is basically a law firm in the middle of your law school. And that brings with it not only where do public patrons come from, how do they get in. Let's say you're meeting someone on a Sunday. What happens? Ours is on the second floor. They have to call and basically have someone help them up. I know other schools have had an exterior entrance just for the clinic. So that's something to think about. Another issue is security. We had a lot of files for our multiple clinics all in one space, and they had to keep those files secure from the rest of us. They don't want me nosing around in the immigration law clinic files, which is quite sensible. So we had a double locking system. So the building could be secured, but within that, all of the clinics are secured with swipe card readers. And another tension, which I'll flag, is if you're thinking about this process, is the clinicians want to be accessible and have office hours and be available to everyone. But the clinic files have to be locked up. So in a way, the clinicians have to be outside of the clinic perimeter in order to gain the most access. So something to think about there. Student organizations are always changing. We fit them in where we could. The journals and reviews are down near the library because of a last-minute change. But they tend to be one of those things that was moving around throughout the process. Any questions about law school specific design issues? Yeah.
Is your largest classroom, is it all the whole first-year class or in one-year class?
At the time the room was designed, before tuition expansion, it was designed to be able to accommodate a full class. Now I believe it can barely accommodate a full class with chairs around the back. And I guess that's something, whether that gets to something that we're going to talk about in a little bit. So where we are is basically you're starting out where the purple dot is, and theoretically we're over here. And you might go by going straight ahead. If you all know what you want, you get together on the first day of the building committee, you say, our institution is committed to X, Y, and Z, this is what we want. That's great. If your institution is more like other law schools, you might be taking the orange path. So let's look at the design process. This is sort of an expanded version of that timeline, which had basically the first part was the pre-design and the programming phase, then the design, development, and finally the construction. So this ends at year 2 because construction documents are what the contractor is going to use to build your building. So let's start out. Pre-design. Okay. Architects will often say, don't think about the building. Don't worry about the building, this looming physicality. Think more about what you want to be. What are your aspirations? Where are you headed? Do you have a mission? Do you want to be the next high-tech top 10 law school? Are you looking to have a real specialty? Are you looking to have a huge LLM program? This gets back to your question about the classroom. Are you looking to expand your classes? Class size potentially over time. How do you see yourself moving in a broader institutional sense? And it will definitely lead to institutional soul searching of one sort or another. So some institutional issues to address. LLM, are you going to have a load of LLM students? If so, you might need a graduate student area. How many students are you going to serve? What's your vision? Do you think you're going to be a high-tech? Do you think you're going to be using technology to teach people all the time? Or do you think that's really a secondary aspect and that you're really designing the class for face-to-face teaching? Or do you think distance learning is the future and you're going to be exporting content all week long? Services offered to the public, so that would be the library. Are you going to open your library to the public, close it? Are you going to open clinics? Are you going to offer CLEs in your building on weekends and evenings? Well, that might have an effect on how you design your building. And what is your relationship within the university? Are you going to have a lot of classes where people are coming to and from campus? If so, you might need to integrate your systems. And finally, think beyond your current situation. Okay? That is probably the hardest piece of advice. Many things in this building, some would say, are reactions to Condon Hall, which is basically a 1970s concrete bunker. And you can say, well, look at all this openness and airiness and light colors and even the light finishes, and say, okay, that's a reaction to Condon. And in some ways it is, but in some ways it's also that we thought, I think, Condon is not where we want to be. Where do we physically want to be? What kind of a space? What kind of a message do we want to send to the people who are going to be entering our space about who we are? Okay. Now we get pre-designed. Now all of a sudden we're starting to design. We're not. Actually, the architect is. The building. So we've got lots of questions about how you do things. Let's say, does the library support the faculty? How do they support the faculty? Does the library support the students? How do they do that? What does academic services have to do with the faculty? And what they're trying to think about is a map, a mental map of how this building is going to start to form. They're going to then take building blocks based on your building committee and try to start putting them together. And at the same time, remember, the budget's going to kick in, and they're going to start saying, well, okay, you've got this much money, you've got this many building blocks that total this much space, you're in trouble, or we're looking good. And finally, they're going to organize all the data, and we're going to look at some ways to do that now. Here's how they do it, and we'll look at these tools. So we have relationship diagrams, we have room data sheets, numeric program, which is how the space is going to be allocated within the building, schedules, the watchword of the process, and meeting minutes, and the architect generally keeps those. So here is a basic relationship diagram. So basically you have the building, and you have the circulation corridors through that upper V. You have some faculty spaces and some gathering spots, these two smaller lobes, a large library, and student spaces. And this is sort of an intellectual map of how you could see the law school. I mean, if this space, you might say faculty spaces are the third and fourth floors. The library is L1 and L2. The student spaces really are largely the first and the second floor, and that the building as a whole addresses the university. So really, that's all you need to build this building. Okay, let's move on to something a little more complex. Now what we're doing is we're looking more at the program, but we're starting to break out the functions beyond just faculty, students, library, university, and say, well, student activities require special facilities. And special facilities require are sometimes related to student-related activities. And often these are instructional, and that might relate to the clinics, and faculty and staff relate to the clinics, instructional, to the library, administration, etc. So you're starting to map out the law school in a cognitive way. And you're not doing this, but you might be looking at this. Let's say that you're all asked as a building committee, what do you guys think about this? Is something missing? This isn't a quiz. There isn't a hidden answer here. But in looking at this, you might say to yourself, well, one of our goals is really for the faculty to become a lot more involved in giving CLEs to gain public prominence, okay, for your university and to help place our graduates. And so you might say, so we'd really like a line between faculty and staff in the CLE office. Now, that's something the architects could never have known that you wanted to have any relationship between CLE and faculty and staff, but you've just given them a piece of information, and that will directly feed back into the process. You might also say, well, those clinicians, they're kind of off on an island, and we don't really care about them, so we're going to kind of eliminate that arrow, because really, clinics aren't instructional. Now, that's ridiculous, but it's possible. So imagine yourself doing that with various functions here, and you can start to see how you are an essential part of the process as the building committee. The university doesn't know much about law schools. The architect often doesn't know much about law schools. You're the only one, as a member of the committee, who can help feed into this loop. And it will have dramatic repercussions. Here's another version. This is starting to look at a library entranceway. And here's the coming in, the lobby space, the circ desk. And then is there a separation between reserve and the stacks? And there's a reference desk. Oh, look, and then over here is the library administration kind of over here. And if you take a library tour, you'll see that basically our library is this, on some fundamental level. It doesn't physically look like that, but intellectually, there's some things we changed in the process, but this is very much what we got. And it's largely due to input in this part of the process. So now we have the horrors, right? That was the fun. I don't know, if you like the big picture thinking, that was the fun part. But being on the building committee takes incredible detail. And so here we have a room data summary. Every room in the building or every type of room in the building is going to have to be defined. This print is too small, so we're going to zoom in a bit. And we're going to say that here is the University of Washington, the new law school design. This is a faculty office. We are going to have 35 faculty offices. Okay, we made a bad mistake. We currently have about 50 full-time faculty members. Yeah. You know, we can talk about emeritus workspaces. We could talk about what happened to faculty workrooms, and you can imagine what happened. So now we have an area, because we decided that we're going to have 185 square foot per room, and we have 35 rooms, that it's going to take, 6,475 square feet. And then each office, we want a 30 by 60 desk. We want a desk chair, 2 or 3 visitors' chairs, a coffee table, a computer with a printer, a coat hook. This is what we want to fit in there. Oh, well, that's not enough. Furniture is kind of easy. But then you start to get involved with, do you want lockable doors? Do you want glass in the door? Do you want light above the door? Carpet, paint, wood paneling, suspended acoustical tile. Here was a nice thing, individually controlled mechanical ventilation. Well, the university said for energy efficiency, offices have to be linked together. So sometimes you'll have a warm-blooded faculty member next to a cold-blooded faculty member, and all the fallout issues that are there. So anyway, just so that you don't think that it's all pie in the sky, you're dealing with these on a very real basis. And you may say about your office, well, I need 4 data jacks. And then you're going to say, okay, well, great, then let's cross off the 2 under data jacks. Let's say down here and say we want 4, or whatever. Now, okay, now we're pulling back again. So the room data sheet is the most micro. We've got faculty and staff up at the very top. You'll see that 3.1.1 faculty, there are 35 rooms at 185 square feet, so for a total of 6,475 square feet. Now, you have all the other stuff for all of the faculty and staff uses along here, and you have a subtotal of 11,820 square feet. Now, that's fine. This is part of the numeric program. This feeds into the larger one. You'll see if you count 3 down, faculty and staff spaces, 11,820 square feet. But you've also got the library, everything else. And then, so you've got a total use of approximately 122,000 square feet. Oh, but wait, didn't you hear somewhere that this is a 200,000 square foot building? Does anyone have any guess for where that unassignable spaces went? Hallways, yeah. Stairways, yeah. Restrooms, walls, yeah. Other stuff? Elevator shafts. Closets. Well, closets, if they're in a room, they count as part of the room, but if they're in a communal area, then they don't. There's some funny rules about that. Pardon? Mm-hmm. Excellent. Yep. MDF, IDF rooms, also all the chiller plant, mechanical. So here, let's take a look. Here's where it all went. So we have 35,000 square feet of corridors in this building. That's basically 1/6 of the building is corridors. Toilets, we didn't talk about. Janitors' closets, the telephone communications, mech rooms take up a substantial amount. We had to provide our own chillers for reasons we don't have to go into now. But you can see that about 37.5% of the building is not really usable by us. So if you're talking about gross square feet versus net square feet, remember that gross square feet means everything, but net square feet is really what's usable. So if you come up with a laundry list of what you want, then you're going to have to remember to basically add 50% on top of that, something like that. That's going to be your gross square footage. And when you're playing the budget game, the harsh master, that size, corridors cost money, elevator shafts cost money, toilets cost money. So you're going to be paying for it. So, yep.
How did you determine how much instructional square footage?
I think, that was part of the programming process. What we decided was, 2 things. Looked at the sizes of the classrooms, size of the classes, and saw which ones were constrained by room size rather than by demand. We also looked at when rooms were used inefficiently. So, for example, we had quite a few seminars in large-ish rooms, and so one of the issues was, do we want more smaller rooms? What that did is that fed back into a loop of wanting flexible space. And in terms of flexible space, what we ended up with are a room upstairs, for example, with a partition. So it can either be 2 seminar rooms or joined together for a 40-person room. In terms of programming, we did originally want a room that could seat everyone, hold 1L orientation one time. And I think that's still feasible, but it's at the edge. So I think it was largely that, figuring out what room sizes we wanted. But I also think that we lost space because of what we were talking about in the U-shaped classroom. U-shaped classrooms can be inefficient. You might have noticed, for example, there aren't that many aisles in our classrooms. You kind of like aisles to be able to get into some of those middle seats, but aisles cost, 5 to 10 seats per aisle. So there was a choice of fewer aisles, more student space, or more aisles, fewer student spaces.
Fewer aisles gets people to come to class on time.
Well, either that, or if they're in the middle, right, and then they're 5 minutes late, then they just go home because they're too embarrassed to walk halfway down the really long aisle. So it's really a matter of the personality type of your law students, maybe. So we've got some tips. Get the relevant parties involved in the start. For example, you're asking about the classroom programming. Get the faculty involved. Get the registrar involved. Get academic services involved, because they're the only ones who have the data. We could sit around and say, well, I think we need a lot of large classrooms. Well, we have probably, in here, we have a lot of classes that are right on the edge, pushing that 40 barrier. It would be nice to have a couple more classes that held 50 and a couple fewer that hold 40, for example. And the only way we could really know that is by getting to the hard data. Not to be critical, it works out fine, but it could, times change. So work on internal consensus building. If you have a really fractious, argumentative building committee at the start, it's not going to get any better. So try to develop some way of agreeing. If it's that you have to agree to disagree, great. Whatever, work that out. Make your needs known. If nobody says, well, we're thinking of starting an IPLLM program, it's never going to get into the program. Right? So definitely make your needs known. Quantify your needs to the best of your abilities. An example of this was the reference office in the library. Basically, they said, well, this is the office that we have, but we really need X, Y, and Z. And currently it's this many square feet, so we want to add that many more square feet. And that was very helpful, because all of a sudden an architect could then say, okay, here we can justify X square feet for the reference office, for example. Understand gross versus net. You already all understand that, right? So we can just cross that off the list. And finally, adjacencies. Now, we've talked about spaces in the abstract, kind of these floating blobs in the law school, but some things are close to each other and some things are far away from each other. In here, for example, the academic services office is close to the faculty up on the 3rd floor. Now, that's kind of a strange adjacency, because actually students are the ones who most often go up to academic services. So you might start to say, well, why is that there? And there are good reasons for it. But if you prioritize your adjacencies, you're most likely to get the most important things next to each other. Okay. Now, what's going to be delivered is 2 huge booklets at this point, the functional and technical program. The functional sort of explains the building. The technical is sort of not how we're going to do it, but the nuts and bolts of the process. And then there's a budget check. So the university program manager will get together with the architect. They'll come up with a raw estimate. How much is this going to be? And then if it's still within budget, great. If it's not, then you play the size and quality. Whether it's saying your slate floor becomes carpet, okay, that could save you some money. You might be able to stay the same size. You're not at that level of detail, but you might sort of start to acknowledge that your quality dream might be slipping to, just very nice. Okay, the architect brings tons at this time. And we're going to look at what they bring to schematic design. Because this is when you're starting to take the ideas that you've been gathering as a committee, they try to put them into a physical image. And then you get to respond. That's the fun part, responding. Yeah?
Where do you balance the maintenance costs and like that? Like, do you have like a large pour machine and a janitor who clean the hallway a lot better, but that takes up a lot of space and storage, so then we say, well, I guess they're all going to be all small, janitor projects are all going to be small. I mean, where do you see those?
Well, we didn't have a lot of those decisions to make, because the university told us your janitor closets will be X square feet and we'll have Y in them. But I do think that you have to, by bringing those people into the process, there's a choice to make. And if you have let's say the custodial lead for the building at your table, you say, well, okay, instead of using that wide waxing machine, is there a narrower one? And he or she might say, oh yeah, we have one of those over in Parrington Hall. We could use that there. And then you've resolved an issue. I guess my favorite, you're never going to do without a lot of meetings in this process. But often meeting people, and frankly talking to them physically rather than email, gets a lot of questions answered. We resolve things in meetings that we thought were intractable just because we had a misunderstanding. So I guess it's a long answer to your question, but everything is fluid as long as nobody says you can't do it. There were some cases where we were told we just couldn't do what we wanted to do. But other than that, sometimes there's standard equipment, for example, light bulbs. we are really limited in the number of types of light bulbs we can use in this building, and also the strength, because they have to be power saving. And so certain lighting configurations and designs were made specifically in order to facilitate meeting university light standards. So there's a feedback loop, I would say, as well. So, okay, we've got floor plans, we've got building elevations, building sections, models, and renderings. This is for the visual folks, for the visual learners who kind of like the diagrams, really didn't like the numbers. Here's your part. Okay, here we are. This is Gates Hall from about 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And you can see that basically that's what we've got. We went from the diagrams with those adjacencies, then we kind of took some numbers, and we took the classroom spaces, and they took these blocks and said, okay, well, you got this block here of special conference. We're right now in the special conference room, right up there at the top. Okay, right behind us, over here is the loading dock, and that still is the loading dock. There is a bank of classrooms in the back, bank of classrooms, and then on the left side over there are the three biggies. And we did cram a couple student organizations in a slightly different spot. The skylights were known because the library is all underneath here, and they knew that they had to get light into the library, so that's why they could drop the skylights in even at this early phase. Okay, so that's what we've got now. Pretty close to it. So you can see you went from one to the other. From this, very quickly to that. Here's a look at a classroom. So now you're starting to look at the geometries of the classroom. Here, they've shifted the jury over to this side, the judge's bench over here, dotted line for the screen. We're going to talk a little bit about reading drawings, but it's incredibly useful to take the time to understand this. If you don't know, for example, I know what this line is here, and you don't ask the architect, and you get in there and you realize that those are all steps, that's not a good thing. It's better to know that each of these are individually stepped. This is a tiered classroom, and you can only really tell that by those lines. So ask lots of questions. The faculty were involved throughout the process. The building committee chair, Bill Anderson, is a faculty member, and we also consulted others in the process. I think that they had certain preferences, and also the students had certain preferences, and they weren't always in conflict. So by having the building committee meet, for example, it was decided that the space, okay, let's talk about something like this, the spacing of these desks. They were able to be a certain distance apart because the students wanted to have free-moving chairs. The faculty at the same time said, I'm a roamer. I need a pit so that I can walk at least up to here and here into the eyes of the one else. So there are certain issues in terms of this well that I think fundamentally affected the trial courtroom configuration because certain depth was desired, particularly depth between the screen and the first set of chairs. So I think if you have concrete thinkers who know what they want, that's great, as long as they represent either a substantial minority or a majority. If you have somebody really kind of quirky, then you have to balance that out. Okay, here's a building elevation. Here's a building cross-section. So here you see the library here, 2 floors of classrooms. This is the 3rd floor, the faculty floor. That's the faculty office, and all that is mechanical.
All that's been.
Pardon? Yeah. They have a lot of the air handling units on top for various reasons. And here are the models. So all of a sudden, they took the program that we just saw with all the red, green, white, and they said, well, how are we going to fit all of this stuff into the law school? And they started with a couple different designs of models. One had that kind of angular feature. One had a rounded top with a pointy wedge. And then the one on the left had more of a rounded end. And so as this process took shape, this is an early evolution. But basically the preferred version was here. But they also took some of the features from this one, and that's kind of the wedge shape that you have at this corner. So over time.
So is the external changing shape as the internal is
In part, yeah.
developing?
Because of the adjacencies, the external is it's built around the internal. And so, for example, to have a classroom, the big classroom over here, necessitated certain structural features and certain shifting of things over to here, which increased the height over there, for example. So it's kind of like a push me, pull you. If you're, and the design process, often they'll think through those types of issues. But at the same time, they're thinking about how it's all going to be coherent. So instead of building blocks where you could put together Legos and it all kind of looks like a mess, the architect is the one who's really taking the program that you've developed and synthesizing the interior and the exterior. So you don't really have as much role in that, other than feedback. And the regents of the university might say, that's ugly, forget it. And then that's the end of that. Yep.
At what point does an engineer, a structural engineer, come in and say, well, you can't have that wide open space because it's a low-bearing ceiling and you have to have pillars?
Right. As my at certain points, when they're doing the cost projections for the go, no-go type decision, what they might do is they might bring in an engineer to say, is our estimate of, I don't know, $300 per square foot reasonable given these types of spans? And if they say, well, no, because you're going to need to do this, which is going to add on to that, then that would affect the cost per square foot calculation. So they're brought in, my understanding is that they're sometimes brought in early on to consult, but that the actual engineer on the project is brought in through the architect. And so they're working together behind the scenes as well, which isn't something that we really saw. So here then they build 3D models that are sort of in situ to see how is it going to work with the land. And then they build even nicer ones. This is not the building we have because you can see that the skylights are in different locations, that angled wall. But you start to get very detailed models. Now, one thing I will mention is that detailed models are expensive. The university does not want to pay for very many of these. So if you're on the building committee early on and you're having challenges visualizing, I would suggest that you try to get into the contract that either there will be, you can't say lots of models, but multiple models, and then they'll add, I know, $10,000 for each model or $15,000 for each model. And also we're going to look at renderings now. This is a rendering. This is not a picture. This is a drawing of what they thought the building would look like. And they paid a lot of money. The university paid quite a bit of money to get this rendering, partly to use in fundraising. So if you're going to try to advocate as on the building committee to get renderings and models, remember that these have probably the highest fundraising potential. You know, it's nice to look at abstract programs, but really if you want somebody to buy into a dream, this is what they're going to buy into. Okay, so here's what we thought we were getting, and there's what we got. Really pretty close. On the internal feature, here was one of only two internal renderings we really got. Because these are AutoCAD files, which you never have anything to do with, they have to wrap surfaces around every set of coordinates. And so it can be both time-consuming and quite expensive for people to go through and color and detail each surface. But the rendering, so here's what it looked like, and here's what it looked like under construction, and now you can see the fruits of the labor are basically awfully similar to that. So renderings are incredibly helpful, especially for helping you see a problem. So let's say you said, well, this wall is really going to block this meeting space from the hallway. We don't want a wall there. You might never have known that just by looking at a blueprint or at a drawing. Okay. So then if you have problems, you comment on a review comment resolution form. And here's where the minutiae really gets in. Because here's where, as you start to look at plans, you're saying, well, we need more outlets here. Or we need, here. This is for the classroom. Let's see. Optimal viewing areas, is it possible to change the screen sizes and heights in certain areas? And then they looked at how they could change some of the rooms to fit those features. So, again, detail-oriented. Now, here's how to survive the process, I think. First of all is make sure you understand the drawings. Can you ask questions? So, for example, why is this here? Why did you do that? How large is this? They have all sorts of different size, architects tend to have different size rulers and work with different size scales. So they can very quickly tell you, oh, that corridor is going to be 6 feet wide, or that corridor is going to be 8 feet wide. And suddenly you might think, well, that's awfully narrow, because if we have, let's say, a bindery shipment coming through there, we might need more space. Or let's say, for example, the Galleria, you wanted to be able to have 8-person round tables for fundraising events out here, and you still wanted people to be able to pass. This is a great area for fundraising events. But if it had been too narrow, it completely would have eliminated our possibility of holding glamorous alumni galas out there. Okay, raise your concerns as early as possible. The later you raise them, the more expensive it is. This is, the cost, let's say that something costs $1 the day the building committee has to consider it. Okay? If they put it off for a week, it's $2. If they put it off for another week, it's $4. If they put it off and then they go back and they revisit the issue, all of a sudden, let's say it's $4 to tear out what they just designed from the drawing, and another $8 to add back in the new feature. Because all of a sudden the architects are saying, well, if you do that, then that's going to affect where the HVAC ducts go, and that intersects with the sprinkler pipes. So the longer you wait to make your decisions, the more expensive it is and the less building you'll get. Okay, evaluate the floor plans, look at them, say, well, why does this work? Why doesn't this work? Things of that sort. At this point, if you want, depending on the nature of your community, you might show the floor plans to other people and ask them, what do they think? There must be aspects of your building that people wonder, why did you ever do that? Okay. And so one of the things you can do, especially if that person asking you is a staff member, is to involve more people in the process. Because the more eyes you get looking at something, you'll say, well, it's kind of stupid. Why did you put the door on the north end of the room when you could have put it at the south end and then it'd be next to the X? You say, gee, that's a great idea. Thanks a lot. You've made the building better. You've also gotten someone to buy into the process. And that person will then feel ownership or might talk to someone else about their idea. And they might say, oh, well, no, it's better on the north side because I tend to bring my papers around this way or that way, whatever the case may be. So you have to balance that with being a filter. Because if you go to a committee meeting and you say, well, 3 people want it on the north side and 3 people want it on the south side, that doesn't really help the committee terribly. So you have to filter the feedback. And finally, and this is incredibly hard to do, let's say that you really think that career services should be on the first floor. You think that every visiting attorney who's coming to interview should see the best part of the law school and be able to very quickly get to career services because that's central to your mission, student employment. And somebody instead has moved career services up to the 4th floor of your building. Okay. You might fight really, really hard to use the special conference room, okay, for career services, and someone say, no, we need that for alumni fundraising, and that's even more important than career services. At some point, you just have to say, okay, fine, it'll stay on the 4th floor or wherever it ended up. I give in. It's for the best, for the good of the school, that kind of a thing. Especially if it's your department that's getting put in a less desirable location. Okay. So finally, at the end of this process, we're going to have a huge schematic design report. We're going to have final floor plans, and we're going to have exterior building elevations. And then there's a lot of other stuff going on at the same time. For example, your local city, county, land use folks, they're all involved in this process, but they're behind the scenes. And then the budget check. So now we've got it made through the first 3 steps, and now most of your work is done, because the building is largely done. Design development is where you're going to start to look at interior elevations. Do you like the way this classroom kind of looks, or do you want a different finish, or maybe you want fixed seating versus mobile seating in certain cases, things like that. Reflected ceiling plans are when you look at what's on the ceiling. So for example, a reflected ceiling plan of this room would show the air ducts, it would show the lights, it would show the speakers, it would show the sprinklers, it would show the partitions. For example, this is a multiple use. I don't know if you've seen it, but there are 2 doors over here with partitions that can close this into 3 separate seminar rooms. So if you're thinking about along those lines, it would be quite late to introduce the partitions because those take up space. But it wouldn't be too late to say we'd like the projector shifted back so we could have a larger screen here. Things like that. Furniture plans. And you would have a chance to probably test a chair. I don't know. How do people feel about this chair? People have been sitting in it for almost an hour. Good? Bad? Okay? Any other comments? Okay. Yeah? It doesn't, right. It doesn't move. So some people did not like this chair because it didn't have wheels. Some people felt this chair was essential to this room because it was stackable. Some people felt actually this chair was quite narrow. Other people felt it was fine and they would permit more people to sit at a table than a wider chair. So you start to get into those types of decisions. As well as the fabric. I don't know, is this kind of a boring fabric? Do you want a little bit zippier fabric? I know this gets into when you start having those discussions about, was it a fall building or a winter building? Which wasn't my strength at all, but there were several people who felt strongly. Yeah.
Have you got any broken chairs so far?
So far we've had great luck with chairs. We have not had any broken chairs. We have had a couple chairs that have had levers come off, but they just slide back on. So. But you have to test, unfortunately, you have to test the chairs in a fairly brief period of time and then come to a resolution. So we could easily have picked a model that didn't work. But luckily, the interior designer came with, for example, about 10 chairs for this room. And we tried about 10 different chairs, and then the committee came to a decision about which chair they liked. And then she came back and said, well, based on the budget, we can afford this fabric, that kind of thing. So a lot of give and take there. And
I have a question about the chairs. I noticed in some other classrooms you have chairs which have wheels.
Right.
In this room, they are all stationary chairs.
Yep.
How did you come up with that?
In those rooms, the use is a classroom, and the use in those rooms will always be a classroom. And so we decided that in those rooms, the chairs will always remain there. This room has the capability to stack all of the chairs inside closets, to move all of the tables out of the room, and to have a reception line or a wedding or I don't know, whatever you wanted to have in here. And so because of that flexibility, it meant the chairs had to be more easily movable and take up less space when being stored. Yeah. So now you've gotten through design development. You've got this huge book that has pasted in fabric samples. It has what chair model, how much they think it'll cost to buy 300 of these chairs, etc. And then you have the final budget check. And then if you go, then you can, well, let's talk about, if you go, then it goes out to bid or can go out to bid. And some of the things that come at this point are AV. The AV package had to be designed because we had needed to know how much that was going to cost. The network had to be designed. At that time, 802.11b had not really come out. 802.11a and G had not even been ratified. But we had to decide, well, what kind of networking model are we going to work from? Things like that. So the gambles come in here. The gambles in terms of waiting. If you know it's not going to cost you a lot to wait and see what Cisco is going to come out with next month or next year, then this is where you can play those kinds of games. Store aside a pot of cash to spend, and then hope that you can use it at the last minute. Okay, 3 top pieces of advice. My top piece of advice is to choose a judicial committee chairperson. That judicial nature was incredibly important to collegiality. So you need decisiveness along with a good listener, I'd say. Secondly, as members, set aside adequate time to participate. Because if you don't set aside time to look at these plans, you're going to get stuck with a building that you don't really like. You're going to wonder why that's there. And basically, you are one of the only 10 people who have the chance to ever change it. So commit to at least 5 to 10 hours a week when things get really crazy, sometimes more. And commit to understanding the process. And finally, treat every decision as final. If you say, we're going with this chair, they go out, they price it. Okay? So let's say we did that. We decided we were going to go with this chair. We liked it a lot. 2 weeks later, we get together, we decide, no, we don't like this chair, we want to try different chairs. You've just spent probably 5 hours of your interior designer's time speccing out the chair, figuring out how much space it's going to take out, maybe dropping it into some drawings to show the spacing of chairs in the room. And then you're also going to cost an additional 5 to 10 hours more at very minimum to pick out a new set of chairs and then have them go back and redo the drawings. So if you think, oh yeah, I can just change that later, let's not worry about that. You're just costing money and throwing it away. So treat every decision as final. Speak up or forever hold your peace. Dan's 3 pieces of advice. Do your homework early. Don't wait till the night before the building committee meeting to finally review the plans, or you'll be up, you'll be tired, you'll miss things. Secondly, don't delay decisions, because if you as a committee decide, oh, let's put that off a little while, that's almost as bad as not treating a decision as final. You're just flushing money down the toilet. And finally, this is probably the key. If you only take away one thing, okay, out of the last hour, just remember this, okay? That when you're thinking about the building and you're sitting there with your room data sheets or you're sitting there with your fabric samples, just remember the awesome aspect of being in a new building. Because, I mean, you can gripe about all the little stuff, but it's all the little stuff that goes together to make a great building. So, thank you very much for your time. And let me know if you have any questions. You can either come on up now, or if you want to go, we're having tours for the next couple of days as well, or if you want to see something behind the scenes, let me know.
Are you going to become a consultant?
I don't know. Yes, if anybody would like a consultant, feel free to contact me in the future. I'll get my business cards printed in the next couple hours. Pardon me? Yes, we're going to have building tours, AV tours, and library tours tomorrow. And we're also going to be having at least AV tours on Saturday. So that'll be dealing with the podiums, the control rooms, and how everything works together from behind the scenes. Hi.
How you came to
Yeah.
combination of
Right.
what you had on
Right.
your shelves at
Right.
that time.
It was almost exclusively driven by three features. One feature was ADA requirements of width of aisles.
Okay,
Second one was the volume count that we had.
right.
And the third one basically was that we were in the basement and the excavation pit size had been decided. And so what happened is once they decided that they were going to excavate half of L2 and L1, then the only question left to be decided was where is the door to the library going to be? And that got pushed back and forth, but that was really the only thing, and everything within the library was sort of set because of the size of the hole.
So the determination of where you could have your hole was controlling how many square feet you would eventually get, or
Effectively,
in the reverse.
well, there were certain size footprint issues with the university has what's called a master use plan, and we had to fit within that. In fact, what we were supposed, this building was originally designed, I should have brought that picture, to be south of here on that green, Harrington Green. And there was a huge outcry about the use of green space for a law school. So now we're sitting on a parking lot. And the size of the law school was defined by some promises that had been made to the legislature. So, for example, it would have cost about, I think we determined that it would cost $50,000 or $100,000 to excavate another, I'm going to have to calculate this roughly, but I think it was another 20 to 30,000 square feet, which is nothing. But there had been a promise made to the legislature that this would be a 200,000 square foot building. So when we suggested that be built, just excavated and not built or done anything with, maybe punched through concrete walls, they said, I'm sorry, you're blocked there. And then they built the building kind of on top of us and looked at where the walls were. So everything kind of shaped itself, but I think largely it was the spacing between the aisles and the number of books.
What about traffic flow, patron activity, and that kind
We
of
had to fit that in.
thing? So
I mean, we have a total right now of 93,000 linear feet downstairs, with almost all of our shelving being 7 shelves high. We determined that would be sufficient, but if they'd said, I'm sorry, but we need more aisle width, then we would have gone down to 85, and we'd have said that's inadequate. Maybe we would have increased our compact shelving to static shelving ratio, something like that.
But you wanted the ground floor, I assume, for your compact.
I think they decided early on that we were going to get the ground floor. I think it was less a floor loading issue and more of a status
That's where
issue.
you're going.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hey.
We were just going through our building phase.
Oh, excellent.
Schematic design. But I'm running into a new dilemma. Basically, I feel like we really don't know exactly what we want everything as far as technology.
Yeah.
Where, like you have the projector here, you have a conduit.
Well, yeah. We messed up. I'll tell you, that projector, see the nose of that projector? Pardon me? Well, there's that, but also it was over here such that the partition that came out was originally going to hit the projector. So what we had to do is we had to move the projector back, and then we had to find a projector that could deal with that distance exactly. So it cost us a lot of money because somebody had not thought through that the relationship between the projector and the partition.
It's the real issues like this is a seminar room.
Pardon?
This is a seminar room,
Right.
So,
It could be. Yeah.
How do you think of, without actually, to put the AC on the floor that way, to pick this kind of furniture, and how you, as an IT person, be part of a committee without really making all the decisions?
I think we need to say, I think that the nice thing is the IT person has a lot of leverage with the students and with the faculty. So I think that, for example, the number of outlets in this room was kept down to keep it looking nice. People cared more about the appearance, and then they said, okay, we're going to get I don't know if you played with these tables.
Yeah, it did.
So you pull the table apart, you've got this cord here, and you also have this locking mechanism. So the decision was made to have fewer outlets and more tables that link together.
Right, but the decision we made with the furniture as well. Like, how did you know what type of furniture to select?
Right. This was pretty late in the process. We looked at where because this floor, remember it's hard because they're concrete floors, so we can't afford to go drill. But here, we looked at where the outlets were and tried to determine where the tables could go. And then outside upstairs is a classroom that is completely this function. I wish there was a whiteboard in here. Imagine the podium is here, and the seats are in rows like this. Someone had thought originally that the seats are oriented like this, so there are 4 outlets in the front row, and there are none behind.
Those things you live with.
Yeah, well, we got tables that plug into the wall, and we put in some wall. Yeah. We really try to avoid wire mold. The university hates it. That's one of those university things where they hate wire mold because it's a tricky material. And so there's liability issues associated with raised mold. So they're actually happy in certain cases to have us put in the brass plates on the walker boxes just because they don't want people tripping on the walker boxes.
Did you hire consultants at all?
We did consultants. The university hired consultants.
The trick is to walk around and go to other places.
That's what it is. Right. Take pictures and get ideas.
What you like, what you need. I mean, for example, over here, this room was quite expensive because they put in these glass walls, and glass isn't rated that highly. So what they had to do is they had to build a sprinkler system all along this wall. So basically, this is like a giant waterfall. All these walls in case of fire. Which added a lot of cost in here. I mean, it looks pretty, and you can't see it because of the way the blinds come up. That's the weird thing about being on the building committee, though, is you don't have that much control because there are just certain elements that someone's decided.
Speaking of control, here, can the instructor control the screen or the processor? How do you control?
Oh, here we have a Crestron panel. This room was frustrating to me because I predicted it would be used as a classroom, and I wanted a full panel in here. But to cut costs, they went with this movable panel. And because they chose the movable panel, for example, it can't be a laptop display unit, so they didn't put a.
But that panel will be we have that panel, and you can make it RGB, you can make it video.
Oh yeah. So we can do all sorts of things.
I mean, it can be the monitor.
Right. Yeah. Right. I think we need a different unit in the closet to do that. We got the cheap unit in the closet.
Also, you have a closet. That's
Here. So we can go take a look at that. So this room is one of the simplest rooms technologically. And we'll flip some more. Yeah, the wheel locks are on. I'm bad about that. I should probably. And then the keys to the kingdom. And this one I'd open as a home, and I forgot.
See, that's the thing. We have to incorporate that in the design.
Absolutely. We have some classrooms that didn't have closets.
Because we don't have closets, so we're thinking of putting that on the podium. That's the problem we're running into, because the podium has to be movable where you can put the seminar.
So we definitely ran into that. And at one point, people decided that they wanted. There was a lot of debate about podium versus rack, and it was interesting because it was the faculty members who didn't want it really in the rack. And the reason why is they didn't want to have their rear end facing the class. So they put in a video.
If there's a problem, then they get.
Exactly.
Oh,
thank you. But, so we put it in here in part because it's also a lot easier to swap out.
Right.
And if we put the podium box over here. So in here, what we have is this room. It has this is the Ethernet and the power.
I see.
And then over here we have all of the microphones, the audio output, and all the rest.
So those professors pretty much stuck in this location.
Yeah.
That's the thing, and that's what our professors don't want.
Right.
In a seminar, they want to be able to push the
Right, move all over the place.
Just basically plug the power and get out of there somewhere.
Yeah,
And that's
it's really, really hard to do.
It's hard to do, and that's what we're running into.
Yeah, I don't know. I wish you the best. I wish you the best of luck. I think until wireless technologies are better, and even then you're going to have to bring power to it.
Right, and the display can only be here, there, or on those 4 walls. You can't.
Yeah. Right. Well, and some people now are talking about distance learning and plasma, and I want to roll the plasma screen around to wherever I want it. And the other thing I have to say, and I don't know if this will hold true for your faculty, is people say they want flexibility, but people also get stuck in a rut.
And when you provide it, they really don't use all the
Exactly. And if you spend a lot of money on flexibility and then they don't use it, then you're kicking yourself.
And what about courtroom technology as far as designing courtrooms? Run into issues where the professors teach the assembly, and at one point he's going to be facing the judge, so you need that whole furniture.
Exactly.
Because I noticed you mix classrooms and furniture a lot.
Right.
Classrooms
And courtrooms. We did that.
I guess it's a small issue to have a display there.
Right, we'd have to roll in a display for the court.
That's
And we just, our faculty, our priorities are really more teaching. So trial advocacy we'll say it's important, but when it comes down to it, I mean, I just don't think that, the people on the committee at least, that's why I think it was important to have it, we should have had more of a trial advocacy voice on the committee probably than we had.
Okay, do have a swivel podium.
Yeah.
Turns.
Now, our folks didn't want that. We talked about the swivel podium. And the problem that they had was if you do that, then you have the jury and the witness, that the geometry for them didn't work with the display system. So, for example, if we had, let's say that this was our podium. And let's say that this swiveled, which it does. Okay, so I'm looking here. Now, the problem is I'm looking at the display.
No, but the swivel podium is in the middle.
Right. Okay, but that's
Like
right.
facing the right.
But if you flip it
Facing
around,
the judge and the center. Go ahead.
right, that's true for the advocate, right? And we had the problem that our trial advocacy people had was not with the advocate, but where does the judge sit when the screen is down, for example.
Oh, but that's the thing. You wouldn't have a screen.
Yeah.
You have some sort of plasma here and there.
Exactly. And then you start to get into
No, I know, and I'm not sure. Other than an expensive plasma solution, what would be the best solution?
Yeah, I don't think there is one. I mean, I'd love to see what other people have done with dual-use classrooms, but I just think it's one of the hardest decisions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time.
Oh, sure. Yeah. If you have other questions, just let me know.
Great. Like this would be a problem for us.
Yeah.
To set up this station here to record,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we have to put stationary cameras in every room, but then it varies because what if they move and the professional.
Exactly. Well, I have the feeling that I probably walked out of the frame a couple times, but I'm not going to let a camera tell me where to walk.
Right, so that's the point. And you still need to be recorded. So, what is that equipment there?
So that is for assisted listening, for people who, we have headsets that will make this a lot more audible.
I see. Oh, great.
Oh, sure, yeah. Thanks for asking.